My name is Sam. I'm 38, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've worked in IT for nearly 2 decades. I'm the kind of guy you picture quietly troubleshooting someone's Outlook at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Since my divorce 5 years ago, I've mostly kept to myself, raising my 12-year-old daughter Lily half the week and building a cautious, routine-driven life. My ex-wife Heather and I are civil, mostly stiff small talk at handoffs, a shared cycle for custody schedules, the occasional fight about homework on text, but nothing explosive. About a year ago, after the pandemic made normal dating feel like science fiction, I met Emily on Hinge. We had mutual friends, laughed about the same internet memes, compared climbing gyms. She was open and direct in the way I find reassuring. She worked in HR for a big regional company, was close to her family, said she wanted something that felt like home after a string of disappointing flings. I liked that. I liked her. We moved in together about 7 months ago, mostly because the Portland rent market is a nightmare. The practicalities blurred with the emotional stuff. Two sets of spatulas, who gets which side of the bed, what brand of almond milk is actually good. Sometimes I'd stop and realize how normal it all seemed. Like, maybe I'd pulled off a reboot. Reading relationship horror stories here, the red flags are usually glaring. Mine crept in disguised as quirks, little preferences, pet peeves. Emily is particular about phone privacy, like Face ID, long, complex passcodes, all push notifications turned off, sometimes closing her laptop just by me walking into the room. I chalked it up to her HR job. She deals with sensitive stuff, right? Once in a while, she'd get defensive if I asked about where she'd been. Just out with Michelle? You ask every time, are you keeping tabs on me? A few times, she'd ask for my phone to play a song on Spotify and then pause on my lock screen, frowning. Casual, but measuring. She once told me she hated when people went off-grid, that her ex ghosted her for a week, and she couldn't stand that feeling. I started texting updates when I was running late, just out of courtesy, or so I thought. There was a night we had a minor argument about chores, nothing worth retelling, when she suddenly switched gears. By the way, can you show me your messages with Heather? I just get weird vibes from how you talk to her. It caught me off guard. In my memory, I handled it calmly. If you want to read the text where I tell her Lily has a sore throat and I'm picking up children's Tylenol, be my guest. She acted a little embarrassed but didn't apologize. The thing is, none of these moments worried me. Not then. I'd spent years second-guessing tiny problems with Heather, smoothing everything over to avoid blow-ups. Here, I thought, Emily is just careful, attuned. Better that than being cold or oblivious, right? Lily liked Emily, or at least tolerated her. There were board game nights, awkward movie marathons, pizza with pineapple fights. I, regrettably, am on Team Pineapple. Emily did her best to win Lily over, buying craft supplies, asking about school, sometimes pushing a touch too hard. But nothing sparked my alarm bells. Emily and Heather never overlapped. The custodial schedule was kept strictly. Heather, for her part, was pointedly distant about Emily. Your friend, she'd sometimes say, in that tight smile way. Work was ordinary. I pulled long hours patching together servers for a new customer and sometimes came home wiped, happy just to watch TV and zone out. Emily started working half remote, which felt natural. Lots of people in my field do the same. But it's worth mentioning. She was home more often, often in the background on Zoom calls, muted, but always within earshot. Looking back, it's hard to say when things started feeling off. In May, I noticed my phone charger missing from its usual spot. Just a little thing. You blame Lily, or maybe you just misplaced it. Then, my laptop browser history was cleared. I thought I'd done it by accident in a flurry of closing tabs. Emily started talking more about privacy. She'd joke, "You'd tell me if you had secrets, right?" Sometimes it felt playful. Sometimes it echoed weirdly, like she was leading me into a test. A week later, a weird pop-up showed on my work laptop, a system log warning for a failed login attempt in the middle of the night. I shrugged it off. Tech can be weird, except when it piles up. I caught myself feeling watched, not in the paranoid way, but in the your house has subtle, unexplained changes way. The kitchen blinds left open when I usually close them. A half-read book placed back on the shelf, not my bookmark. One night, after Emily and I went to bed, I heard her up in the living room in what sounded like a tense phone call. The walls are thin. I made out fragments. He's at work? It's fine. I just want this over with. When I asked about it, she said it was her sister, some family drama. Even writing this now, it sounds thin and neurotic. I remember that feeling, catching myself cataloging tiny weirdnesses, then instantly scolding myself for being suspicious. I never wanted to be that guy. In hindsight, I was habitually gaslighting myself. The last normal memory is oddly sweet. A Sunday, Emily making risotto, Lily at a sleepover, the house calm. I remember thinking, if normal is just quiet, then I could do quiet forever. 2 days later, I noticed a strange USB stick on the coffee table. Not mine. When I asked Emily, she flicked her eyes at it and said, "That's from work. Don't touch it. Confidential stuff." She put it in her purse. That night, when I went to plug my phone into charge, I noticed a tiny black device plugged into the wall behind the couch. A quick glance. It was a mini voice recorder, one I'd seen advertised for note-taking or interviews. The battery light was blinking. I didn't say anything. I just pulled it out and weighed it in my palm, feeling for the first time the cold certainty that something beneath the surface had shifted, and there was no pretending it was normal anymore, that I'll admit. The moment I held that voice recorder, I half expected a rational explanation. Maybe Emily needed it for that HR case she kept mentioning. Maybe Lily borrowed it for a school project. Hell, maybe it belonged to a visiting friend left behind by accident. But my gut said otherwise. For the first time in years, I felt the old, familiar crawl of anxiety, like the ground underfoot needed a patch. But you didn't know where the hole was. I put the recorder in my work bag. Left the living room exactly as I'd found it. Anything else, I thought, would give away that I noticed. Lily was due that evening. I switched into dad mode, shelved the paranoia for math homework, a frozen pizza, and an episode of Baking Impossible. But later, after Lily was asleep, I sat in my home office, the little black device in my palm. It was a generic model, brandless, less than $30 on Amazon. I unscrewed the back, found a standard micro SD card. I considered whether to listen. Part of me, the part raised on internet advice, screamed, check for spyware, film yourself during discovery, don't tamper. But my more rational brain took over. This is my house. This is plugged into my wall. I copied the files to my encrypted drive, technical footnote for the curious, Veracrypt container, backed up to USB, then rough notes made in OneNote, not cloud synced, just local. I closed the device back up and returned it behind the couch. Of course I listened. There were hours of mostly silence. Then, pan clatter, cooking sounds, fragments of my voice. Me, on speakerphone with my sister talking about lawn care. Emily humming to music. Can't say why, but hearing myself unaware was like a gut punch, something fundamentally violating about it. Somewhere in the middle, a clipped argument. Me grumbling about dishes, Emily's reply tense. Out of context, even my own words sounded colder than I remember. There was more than one recording, though. The device had clearly been reset and reused. The date stamp started about 2 weeks prior. I downloaded the folder, then deleted the files from the device itself. If she checked it, she'd see the correct time, but no proof I'd listened. I kept a perfect, unchanged backup. My heart pounded most of that night. You see, the worst part wasn't anger. It was doubt in myself. Doesn't everyone deserve privacy at home? Was I being melodramatic? Was I risking my relationship and Lily's sense of stability by digging into this? I thought of Reddit posts with titles like AITA for snooping through my partner's stuff. The thread always devolves. Someone says, if you snoop, you'll find something you don't like. But something uglier gnawed at me. What if this wasn't just about Emily? What if there was more going on? I remembered how Heather, my ex, seemed colder to me lately. Quicker to correct tiny faults, more suspicious about Lily's schedule. I remembered her pointed questions. Emily seems intense. Is everything okay at home? If anything ever happened, you'd tell me, right? Looking back, I realized those questions felt a lot like someone checking a boundary, seeing how much I'd risk answering. The next morning, I started running system diagnostics on my home network. Check for new devices, recent connections, MAC addresses I didn't recognize. I wrote down which smart plugs and speakers were active, then scrolled through their history. Nothing unusual, except the living room smart speaker had a much longer activity log than usual, random voice queries, sometimes late at night when I wasn't even home. What time is it? Play Spotify. Even my own Netflix profile had odd watch history. Was Emily just using the speaker more? Or was she recording my routines, making a log of my habits? I bought a fresh USB camera, one of those hidden in a clock models, and angled it toward the living room when Emily went to yoga. Not the proudest moment of my life, but I needed to know. I didn't talk to anyone, not even my closest friend, Mike, who I usually vent to about stupid fantasy football trades. But that night, I messaged another old friend, Mara, my law school roommate, who'd become a small firm attorney. We hadn't talked since Christmas. I opened with something like, "Hey, crazy question. If someone was secretly recording you in a shared home, is that illegal here?" She took a day to reply, but when her answer came, it was crisp. Depends on expectation of privacy, state laws. If she's a partner, some things are grayer, but generally, you can't record someone in a home without at least implied consent. Why? You okay? I said I'd explain soon, and she told me to keep a journal of everything. This became a new routine. Add an entry every night. Date, time, anything odd. Documenting, not confronting. Emily grew more attentive, strangely so. Less distracted, more present, offering to make coffee, to drive me to work. She sometimes left her own phone open, as if inviting me to snoop. I did, once, only to see that her messages were wiped clean, email logs auto-archived. HR people know how to cover their tracks. With the hidden camera, I got video of her plugging the voice recorder in again after I'd gone running, removing the card, swapping it for another. She also seemed to spend more time on speakerphone, speaking softly. I caught phrases like, "He's still acting normal." "No, he hasn't confronted me." I saved the video, dated and timestamped, uploaded to a newly made cloud folder with two-factor authentication. Thank you, IT paranoia. I noticed Heather texting about changes to Lily's schedule more than usual. Emily says you've been distant. Is something up? It felt coordinated, or maybe I was losing my mind. Reddit loves the word gaslighting. I used to roll my eyes at it. Now I just felt numb. The last weekend before everything exploded, I tried desperately to pretend. Barbecue in the backyard, Lily blowing soap bubbles, Emily laughing with a glass of wine. The weather was perfect, but I caught her watching my phone screen once when she thought I wasn't looking. I barely recognized my own reflection in the kitchen glass, shoulders tense, eyes darting. I started sleeping poorly, dreams replaying tiny moments. Emily looking through drawers, Heather saying, "I just want what's best for Lily." In quiet moments, I wondered if I'd built my whole life on trusting the wrong people again and again. On Sunday night, after Emily went to bed, I sat recording a video diary on my laptop. "I don't know what's coming," I said, trying to keep my voice even in case someone ever had to watch it. "But I need you to know I tried to do everything by the book." I uploaded the clip, titled it "Just in Case." Understood. I'll keep it in uniform narrative flow without midsection headers, maintaining that immersive, confessional Reddit style throughout. Here's the next part. When things finally broke, it didn't go down like a movie confrontation or some big dramatic reveal. Instead, it started with an email, just a sterile little requested HR meeting confirmation from my boss, CC'd with an HR rep from my own company. I stared at the computer screen, already tired after a long night of not really sleeping. The HR message was all pleasantries, but I could read between every line. "Concerns have been raised. We want you to feel supported. Please confirm your attendance tomorrow at 10 a.m. I felt my pulse speeding up, hands cold. I tried to zoom out, look at the room, the sunlight through the curtains, the cheap IKEA lamp, the cereal bowl from Lily's breakfast, like an anchor, reminding myself that these mundane things still existed, no matter how surreal everything felt. I didn't even consider going to Emily about it. Instead, I texted Mara. "Something's up. HR meeting, cryptic wording. Can I call you later?" She responded instantly this time. "Don't say a word. Don't speculate. Just go, listen, and take notes. I'll walk you through next steps after." The next afternoon, I walked into the HR office with my work laptop slung under one arm and a legal pad ready. There was a woman from HR and my manager, who I'd known for 6 years and who suddenly looked at me like I was radioactive. They hit me with it almost right away. There'd been an anonymous tip about potential inappropriate conduct, hostile environment, and concerns for staff safety in my home and via work communications. As per company policy, we're compelled to start a formal investigation. We'd like to hear your perspective before we determine next steps. I asked, as calmly as I could, what the specific complaint was. HR was noncommittal, citing confidentiality, ongoing process, etc., but slid a printed copy of an email across the table. I immediately recognized Emily's wording. The phrasing was all too familiar from the times I'd seen her write up disciplinary notes from her own HR work. She had included detailed logs of my home moods, comments allegedly made to her and Lily, screenshots out of context, and a link to 3 short audio clips, perfectly cherry-picked from the weeks of voice recordings I had already cataloged and stored. The HR rep asked if I wanted to respond. I asked for time to collect my own materials and consult counsel. They seemed disappointed, but ultimately agreed. After the meeting, I stepped outside and just stood in the parking lot for almost 20 minutes, breathing the muggy Portland summer air and watching cars pass, feeling half invisible. I texted Mara, "Activate DEFCON 2." She called immediately. "This is as bad as it looks," she said bluntly. "You need to treat every conversation as on the record. You need certified, time-stamped backups. We'll draft your statement. Do not confront Emily directly." I drove home and saw Emily in the living room, typing on her laptop, a look of tightly controlled concern on her face. "Rough day?" she asked, voice practiced, gentle. I felt that sick chasm between the memory of warmth and the present reality, like remembering summer while watching snowfall. I locked myself in the office and pulled up everything. I had dozens of hours of audio, every video of the living room camera, all the logs of her swapping out USB cards and voice recorders. I printed off a detailed chain of custody, noting device discovery, dates, the camera catching her, my own non-interference with the evidence, and my communications with legal counsel the moment any suspicion emerged. I put together timeline spreadsheets of messages with Heather, cross-referenced against anything Emily had claimed about me and Lily. 2 discordant narratives. 1, me trying to keep a peaceful, normal home for a preteen co-parenting through the pandemic. The other, a list of grievances painting me as unpredictable, cold, and, even more shocking, intimidating. That night, I started seeing missed calls from Heather. When I finally picked up, her voice was cold and armored. "I just heard from Emily. She says you threatened her. Sam, I need to know Lily is safe." Hearing that twisted something in me, a mix of shame and exhaustion. I tried to explain calmly, but she cut me off. "Please don't make this about you." I hung up with my hands shaking, feeling my throat ache. For the first time in years, I cried. Not sobbing, just silent, fat tears, face buried in my palm, because there was no one else to see. After midnight, I sat down and wrote a 40-line statement for HR, simply outlining the relevant facts. When I discovered the recordings, how I documented them, that I was consulting counsel, and that as per Oregon law, every member of the household deserved privacy and no consent had been requested or given for in-home surveillance. I attached metadata files and video clips showing her placing recorders in my space, date-stamped and unedited, and offered to provide access to my full logs. I ended the message by requesting assurance that Lily's privacy would be protected from any further intrusion. The next day at work, I knew people were talking. No one said anything obvious, just the way conversations would stutter when I entered a room, or the way an old work friend avoided meeting my eyes in the hallway. I've always considered myself respected, maybe even liked, but the faint, greasy trace of suspicion covered everything now. I couldn't blame them. Tech people whisper about this kind of thing, even if they don't believe it. I started thinking of everything as evidence, every routine, every text. Even Lily's drawings on the fridge, a house, 2 stick-figure parents, one with a question mark for a face. The real shock came 3 days later when a uniformed police officer knocked at my door. "Samuel Price?" I nodded, heart racing. "We've received a report of possible domestic disturbance, emotional and psychological harassment in your shared residence." Again, not a movie scene. There were no shouts, no arrests, just professional, clinical protocol. He asked kindly if I would answer a few questions. He recorded the conversation. I handed over a USB with the backup files, said I'd retained counsel, requested that every exchange follow required protocol. The officer nodded, seeing this more than I could ever guess. Emily sat quietly on the stairs for the first 20 minutes, eyes red, staring at her hands. After a whispered conversation with the officer, She slipped outside, phone already dialing. The next 2 weeks are mostly a blur of paperwork, emails back and forth with Mara, affidavit drafts, Lily staying with Heather for her own stability, sudden silences from my manager and team. It's astonishing how fast your entire public life, job, parenting, relationships, can be rearranged with only a few vague but serious words and a handful of curated evidence. Emily never confronted me directly. She'd come into the kitchen, make tea, say nothing. The house shrank around us, echoing with all the warmth that had once made it home. After nearly a month, the results started coming in. The HR investigation closed with a branding of unsubstantiated, pending legal outcome. The police could not confirm any threats or harassment. But the stains lingered, in my work reputation, in Lily's confused eyes when she finally came back for a weekend, in every friend who no longer lingered after a meeting. Emily moved out. She never really apologized. Her final words were, "I'm sorry if you think I hurt you, but I had to protect myself." I didn't feel safe. I stared at her as she shut the car door, part of me wanting to believe her, part knowing better. Heather and I spoke only through lawyers for 2 months. Lily drew smaller and quieter, clinging to her routines. Sometimes, when the house was finally empty, I'd find new devices left behind, a reminder of the forensic caution I now lived by. I boxed everything up and stored it in the garage for Mara to reference, if necessary, for any future claim. I'd like to say that winning, being vindicated, having the truth come out, felt like victory. But it only felt like the beginning of something harder, a kind of brittle aftermath I wasn't sure how to live through yet. Final update. 6 months have passed. There are entire days when I don't think about it, not directly. Then something brings me back. The way my phone vibrates with an unknown number, Lily closing her bedroom door a bit too quietly, my hand instinctively double-checking the living room for bugs or blinking LEDs before bed. People like to imagine that getting cleared is the end of things. You get a ruling. No crime, no HR discipline. You keep your job, you keep nominal custody. Justice wins, ties back storylines in a neat bow. But real life isn't a TV script. The aftershocks don't have the decency to fit inside a single season. The police closed the case. My company formally ended their review and buried everything in a confidential file. Emily ghosted. Heather, eviscerated by how easily she'd let herself be swept up and weaponized, offered a conditional apology, delivered, to my amazement, in person. One stilted Saturday afternoon, she came to the porch and stood there awkwardly, hands white at the knuckles. "I thought I was helping Lily," she said, barely meeting my eyes. I believed I had to act. Emily convinced me. "I'm sorry for what followed. That's all I can say right now." I nodded, having rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head. The real thing was smaller, more brittle. I let her finish, then said that if Lily needed both of us, we had to try to put things back together. Not for forgiveness, just for function. I could see the guilt all over Heather, even if she'd never admit it. As the weeks wore on, we began to negotiate new routines, changing custody swaps, emails instead of texts, extra clarity so no detail could be weaponized or misunderstood. Sometimes I thought I saw regret in her eyes, sometimes just exhaustion. Emily faded from my life like a watermark in old paper. Nothing left but faint outlines and practical reminders. Every so often I'd get an automated message about forwarding mail or see her social media pop up, scrubbed of every reference to our time together. I deleted every album, every photo that had her face, except the ones with Lily. She deserved to keep the parts of her childhood that weren't about this storm. Work was another story. My manager invited me back, pointedly mentioning my exemplary documentation and conduct under review. Officially, nobody brought up what happened. Unofficially, the air between me and several teams was different. I'd join Zoom meetings and see sidebar chats flicker, faces change when I spoke. The inside jokes and casual after-work beers evaporated. I understood. Nobody wants to be in the blast radius when someone's life goes nuclear. There were subtler things, too. I caught myself scanning every shared space, at home and at the office, checking for recording lights, searching for security flaws. At night, I'd listen for the click of a recording device that wasn't there or double-check the smart plug logs. No rational reason. Repetition breeds paranoia. Ironically, being forced to chronicle everything for an audience. HR, police, my lawyer, made me realize how small most details of a relationship are. Red flags never march in formation. They scatter, hide behind Sunday breakfasts and ordinary laughter. Part of me resented how quickly I'd been convinced by Emily's version of things, even when the facts were with me. Another part just felt tired. I didn't want to be hardened or bitter. I wanted the capacity to miss the signs, just once more, without consequence. Lily started therapy in October, and at first, she wouldn't say more than a handful of words about Emily or her mom's sudden silence. I spoke to her school counselor, explained only the broad strokes. Family stress, some changes at home, nothing you need to worry about. It sounded both true and like an omission. Children are too perceptive for these dodges, but I had no better script. Gradually, Lily came back, her sense of humor, her stubbornness, her taste for pineapple pizza and dumb YouTube videos. But each time Heather came over for a swap, I saw her brace herself just before she rang the bell. I couldn't blame her. Trust is easy to destroy, hard to patch, and there's no clear manual for the work. I kept seeing Mara, my lawyer friend, and possibly now, my actual friend again. There was no lawsuit. I'd followed the letter of every law, and so had Emily, in the strictly technical sense, even if the moral lines had blurred. Oregon statutes are a gray mess about in-home consent when cohabiting adults are involved. The DA quietly declined charges for either side. What stuck with me was what Mara said, sitting across from me at a cafe one rainy morning. Truth is just a tool. People use it, bend it, drop it. The point isn't to prove you're a good person. The point is to survive the version of you that others create. Some days I wonder if I could ever come to trust a partner again, or if life will always have this filter, a kind of hypersensitivity to privacy, loyalty, even my own moods. Will I see surveillance in every gift, betrayal in every argument? I keep a therapist's number in my phone. Haven't called yet, but I will. For now, my daily rhythms help. Morning bike rides, making Lily breakfast, debugging servers, mowing the lawn. I started journaling longhand, just private musings, no backups, no OneNote, no encrypted cloud. I make myself finish each entry not with if only, but with one thing I did right that day. Picked up ice cream for Lily, changed a tricky router setting, told a distracted friend at work that their code really was good. I read Reddit less these days, but sometimes I lurk, see stories like mine start to play out for others. Confusion, doubt, the slow drip of truth, the cleanup nobody warns you about. I thought, after Heather, I'd never let anyone get close enough to really damage me. Then I thought, with Emily, that care and vigilance could be protection. Now I don't think so. The world isn't divided into villains and victims, saints and monsters. Just people who do selfish things, frightened things, rationalize their actions, sometimes with real love twisted in with the harm. If you're reading this, waiting for a moment where I got revenge or some grand closure, sorry. The story ends with a house half full, with doubts and paperwork in the closet and a daughter's trust restored in pieces instead of all at once. The happy ending is just showing up again and again, doing my best not to let the past script the next chapter. So that's it. Not a victory lap, just a life that continues, a little more cautious, a little more honest, and maybe, with time, a little more hopeful.